Nicholas Hartwell moved through the Ashford Ballroom with the deliberate precision of a man executing a strategy he had planned down to the last detail. The crowd parted before him, as crowds always parted before dukes, especially dukes with reputations for ice and absolute control. He was aware of the whispers that followed in his wake, aware of the speculation about why the Ice Duke had chosen to attend tonight's ball when he so rarely graced such events. But he did not care about the whispers. He cared only about reaching the woman standing beside the potted palms before his nerve failed him entirely. Lady Vivienne Sinclair swept into the ballroom like a queen claiming conquered territory, and the whispers shifted immediately from speculation to scandal. She was extraordinarily beautiful, the kind of beauty that announced itself with trumpets. Her midnight blue silk gown cut daringly low, sapphires glittering at her throat and wrists, her black hair elaborately styled. She was, by all accounts, the Duke of Ravencroft's mistress, a position she had occupied for 3 years with a brazenness that both shocked and fascinated London society. Vivienne's dark eyes found Nicholas immediately, her lips curving in a smile of possessive triumph. She began moving toward him, the crowd parting for her as eagerly as they had for him, everyone positioning themselves to witness the reunion of London's most infamous couple. But Nicholas did not pause. He did not acknowledge her presence. He did not so much as glance in her direction as he walked directly past her, his grey eyes fixed on something across the ballroom that only he could see. Vivienne's beautiful face froze, her smile transforming into an expression of shock so profound that the nearby witnesses gasped audibly. The Duke of Ravencroft had just publicly cut his mistress in front of 500 of London's most dedicated gossips. The scandal would be enormous. But Nicholas barely registered the gasps, the whispers rising in pitch and volume. He kept walking past the dancing couples, past the clusters of matrons with their marriage-minded daughters, past the young men lounging with studied nonchalance, directly toward the woman who had no idea her life was about to change irrevocably. Clara Winters stood beside a particularly robust arrangement of potted palms and tried very hard to be invisible. At 24 years old, she had perfected the art over 7 seasons, learning exactly how to position herself in corners where the light was poor and the attention was elsewhere. She wore a simple gown of pale grey silk, her copper hair pulled back in an unfashionable style, her spectacles perched on her nose despite her mother's endless complaints that they made her look like a governess. She was not watching the Duke approach. She was watching Lady Vivienne's face transform from triumph to horror, and her novelist's mind was already composing sentences to capture the moment. The mistress had dressed for the reunion and found only rejection, she thought. The sapphires at her throat glittered like tears she was too proud to shed. Her publisher would strike the line, of course. Mr. Pembroke struck all her best lines, claiming that readers of Gothic romance preferred their prose less acerbic. But Clara wrote them anyway. Small private rebellions against a world that found her wanting. She became aware of movement in her peripheral vision, of conversations dying around her like candles being snuffed out one by one. She looked up from her observations of Lady Vivienne and found herself staring directly into a pair of grey eyes, the colour of winter storms. Nicholas Hartwell, Duke of Ravencroft, stood 2 feet in front of her, and as she watched in complete bewilderment, he sank to one knee on the polished marble floor. The ballroom fell utterly, deafeningly silent. "Miss Winters," the Duke said, his voice low and clear, carrying just far enough for nearby witnesses to hear. "Would you do me the honour of the first dance?" Clara could not speak, could not move, could barely process what was happening. Behind the Duke, she could see 500 shocked faces. Her mother had gone white as her pearls. Her sister, Elizabeth, appeared to be mouthing something, possibly a prayer. And Lady Vivienne looked as though she had swallowed broken glass and was too proud to spit it out. "Miss Winters," the Duke prompted, still kneeling, still holding her gaze. "Your answer, if you please." This is madness, Clara thought wildly. A fever dream. Or perhaps I have finally succumbed to novel-writing insanity and am even now being carted off to Bedlam. But her hand, operating independently of her stunned mind, extended toward him. "Yes," she heard herself say. "That is, I accept." The Duke rose with fluid grace and took her gloved hand in his. His fingers were warm even through the layers of silk and kidskin, and something odd happened in Clara's chest, something fluttering and alarming that she firmly supported. She was not some green girl to be undone by a handsome face. There was something wrong here, something she did not understand, and she would not be distracted by grey eyes and elegant hands. He led her onto the dance floor, and the orchestra, recovering from their collective shock, struck up a waltz. Other couples joined the floor, but the attention of the entire ballroom remained fixed on the Duke and the wallflower he had inexplicably chosen. "You are wondering why," he said, as he placed one hand at her waist and took her fingers in his other. "Among other things," Clara managed, grateful that her voice emerged steadier than she felt, "such as whether you are drunk, mad, or operating on some species of wager." Something flickered in those grey eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or something darker. "None of those, Miss Winters." "Then enlighten me, Your Grace, for I confess myself entirely at sea." Frau. They moved through the opening figures of the waltz, and Clara was dimly aware that they danced well together, that his lead was confident without being overbearing, that her body responded to his guidance as though they had practiced this very dance 100 times before. "You are not what I expected," the Duke said. "No one expects wallflowers. That is rather the point of us." His hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her waist. "You hide behind self-deprecation. I prefer to think of it as refreshing honesty in a sea of polite prevarication." "And what conclusions did you draw when you observed my entrance?" Clara considered her answer carefully. This conversation was a maze, and she sensed that wrong turns would have consequences. "I concluded that you wished to make a public statement. What statement and why I cannot guess. But I am quite certain that I am merely the instrument of your message, not its intended recipient." War. The music swelled around them. The Duke guided her through a turn with impeccable precision. "You are perceptive," he said finally, "more perceptive than most. I have had a great deal of practice in observation. When one is invisible, one sees a great deal." "And what do you see when you look at me, Miss Winters?" It was a dangerous question, and Clara knew she should deflect it with some commonplace about his reputation or his title. But the strange intensity of this encounter had shaken loose her usual caution. "I see a man who has armoured himself against the world. I see walls built high and thick. I see—" She hesitated, then continued, drawn on by something in his grey eyes that looked almost like hunger. "I see someone who is tired of his own armour, but has forgotten how to remove it." The Duke missed a step. It was infinitesimal, the smallest faltering, but Clara felt it and knew she had struck some hidden mark. For a moment, his mask slipped, and she glimpsed something raw beneath. Pain, perhaps, or loneliness, or the peculiar desperation of a man who has forgotten how to want things. Then the mask returned, smoother and colder than before. "The dance is ending," he said. "I find I have more to discuss with you, Miss Winters. Will you walk with me in the portrait gallery? Without a chaperone? The scandal would be— There has already been enough scandal tonight. A few more minutes in my company will change nothing." His grey eyes held hers. "Unless you are afraid." Clara should have refused. Every rule of propriety, every instinct for self-preservation, told her to return to her potted palms and wait for this inexplicable evening to fade into memory. "I am not afraid of you, Your Grace," she said. "Lead on." The portrait gallery was dim and cool, lit only by a few scattered candles that threw dancing shadows across the painted faces of long-dead Ashfords. Clara could hear the distant strains of music, the muffled roar of conversation, but here in this hushed corridor they might have been alone in the world. The Duke stopped before a portrait of some bewigged ancestor, but his attention was not on the painting. He turned to face her, and in the candlelight his beautiful, severe face seemed almost vulnerable. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "Several, I should think. I am not accustomed to explaining myself. Then this will be a novel experience for both of us. I am not accustomed to being publicly singled out by notorious dukes." His lips twitched, not quite a smile, but the suggestion of one. "You have a sharp tongue, Miss Winters. I have a sharp mind, Your Grace. The tongue merely follows." He was silent for a long moment, and Clara had the sense that he was choosing his words with unusual care. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher, stripped of its aristocratic polish. 3 months ago, I discovered that my man of business had been embezzling from my estates. The losses were recoverable. What was not recoverable was the reason for his betrayal. He had gambling debts, creditors threatening his family. In desperation, he made a devil's bargain with a consortium of men who now hold evidence that could damage my reputation and my estates. Clara frowned. I do not understand what this has to do with... The consortium's leader is a man named Edmund Sinclair. Wealthy, well-connected, utterly without scruple. He intends to destroy me, not financially, but socially. He believes I wronged him years ago, and he has nursed that grievance into an obsession. What wrong does he believe you committed? I refused to marry his sister. Understanding began to dawn. Lady Vivienne Sinclair before she married Lord Sinclair, Edmund's younger sister. The Duke's voice was flat. I was young and foolish enough to engage in a brief flirtation with her. She took it more seriously than I intended. When I made clear I had no intention of offering marriage, she married Lord Sinclair instead. He died and left her wealthy but bitter. Edmund blames me for her unhappiness. And your arrangement with her, Clara said slowly, the one all of London believes to be a convenient fiction, Nicholas. Vivienne wanted access to society at the highest levels. I wanted protection from matchmaking mothers and the pressure to remarry. We agreed to present ourselves as attached, nothing more. It was never physical. Clara absorbed this. But something has changed. Edmund has decided that fiction was no longer sufficient. He has demanded that I actually marry Vivienne, to make her a duchess in truth. If I refuse, he will release the evidence against my man of business and manufacture additional scandals. He has the resources to make my life very difficult. And so you have decided to marry someone else instead. Clara's voice was calm, but her heart was pounding. Someone who is not his sister. Someone who cannot be refused once the engagement is announced. Why? Someone whose position would be so unexpected, so dramatic, that any attempt to disrupt the match would seem like sour grapes rather than legitimate objection. Someone invisible, Clara said quietly. Someone no one would suspect you of genuinely wanting. Someone whose sudden elevation would be attributed to whim or madness rather than strategy. The Duke did not deny it. You chose me, Clara continued, because I am the most unlikely candidate imaginable. Because no one will believe you actually desire me, and therefore no one will believe that removing me would solve Edmund Sinclair's problem. You understand the strategy. I understand that I am being used as a chess piece in a game I did not agree to play. Clara's voice sharpened. You humiliated Lady Vivienne publicly. You singled me out from 500 guests. You knelt before me as though I were some prize you had sought. Do you have any notion of what you have done to my reputation? I have made you the most talked about woman in London. I did not wish to be talked about. I wish to be left alone with my quiet life. I am offering you something better. You have offered me nothing. You have taken. Clara pressed her hands together to stop them from trembling. What happens now, Your Grace? Do you expect me to meekly agree to this charade? The Duke was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost uncertain. I am offering you marriage, Miss Winters. A real marriage, not a charade. Clara stared at him. I need a wife, he continued. Not merely the pretense of an engagement, but an actual duchess. Edmund will not be satisfied with anything less. I am 32 with no heir. I had resigned myself to a cold match with some suitable candidate. But then I began to observe you. Observe me. In ballrooms, at musicals, in the corners where you think no one notices you. His grey eyes held hers. I noticed you, Miss Winters. I noticed that you watch everything with those sharp eyes behind your spectacles. I noticed that you seem to be composing something in your head, your lips moving silently. I noticed that you are kind to servants and utterly indifferent to the opinions of those who dismiss you. He took a step closer. I noticed that you are not what you pretend to be. Clara's throat was tight. And what do I pretend to be? Ordinary, forgettable, content with invisibility. His voice dropped. You are none of those things. You are extraordinary, Miss Winters, and you are wasted on potted palms. No one had ever called her extraordinary. No one had ever looked at her the way the Duke of Ravencroft was looking at her now, as though he saw through all her careful camouflage to the hungry, restless woman beneath. You are trying to manipulate me, she whispered. I am trying to be honest with you. A novel experience, I assure you. His mouth curved. I am offering you a bargain, Miss Winters. Marry me, become my duchess. In exchange, I will provide you security, position, and complete freedom to pursue whatever interests occupy that formidable mind of yours. I will make no demands on your heart. I will expect nothing from you but discretion and the eventual production of an heir. We will live as polite strangers who happen to share a name and a home. And what of love? The question escaped before Clara could stop it, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. I am not capable of love. The Duke's voice was flat, final. That capacity was destroyed in me long ago. I will not pretend otherwise, but I can offer you honesty, Miss Winters. I can offer you respect. I can offer you a life far larger than the one you currently inhabit. Clara turned away from him, pressing her fingers to her temples. This was madness. Dukes did not propose to Wallflower. Dukes certainly did not offer marriage as though it were a business arrangement. And yet she thought of her family's strained finances. She thought of the dwindling funds set aside for her dowry, quietly redirected to pay her brother's gambling debts. She thought of the future that awaited her, years as a dependent spinster, living on the charity of her married sisters. She thought of her novels, her secret passion, the manuscripts hidden beneath floorboards. She thought of what it might mean to have resources, independence, a husband who expected nothing from her heart. If I refuse, she said slowly, what happens to me? Society has seen you kneel before me. They have seen us waltz. They have seen us disappear together into this gallery. His voice was kind. I will ensure that the blame falls on me, that you are seen as the sensible woman who rejected a madman's impulsive proposal. Your reputation may even improve. It was the right thing to say. He was giving her a genuine choice, not trapping her with the threat of ruin. And somehow that kindness tipped the balance. I have conditions, she heard herself say. Something shifted in the Duke's posture, a release of tension she had not realized he was holding. Name them. I will not give up my spectacle. I do not care if they are unfashionable. I would not ask you to. I require a library, a good one, and the freedom to purchase whatever books I wish without explanation. Ravencroft Manor has an extensive library. You may add to it as you see fit. Clara took a deep breath. I have a project, a private pursuit that I will not discuss with you, but which requires time and solitude. I must have the freedom to continue this work without interference. Something flickered in his eyes, curiosity perhaps, but he merely nodded. Your time will be your own. This was madness. This was the most reckless thing she had ever done in her cautious, careful life. But standing here in the dim gallery, facing a man who looked at her as though she mattered, she felt something stir in her chest that she had thought long dead. Hope. Then I accept your proposal, Your Grace. She extended her hand. I will marry you. The Duke took her hand, and for a moment neither of them moved. His fingers were warm through their gloves, his grip firm but not crushing. In the candlelight, his grey eyes seemed almost silver. Thank you, he said, and his voice was rough. You will not regret this, Miss Winters. I swear it. I hope not, Your Grace, for both our sakes. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her gloved knuckles. It was a formal gesture, correct in every particular, but something in the way he lingered just a heartbeat too long made Clara's breath catch. When he released her hand and stepped back, his mask was firmly in place once more. We should return to the ballroom. I will make the announcement tonight. Tonight? Speed is essential. Edmund Sinclair will move quickly once he realizes what I have done. We must be engaged before he can mount a counter-strategy. It made sense. It was logical. It was also completely terrifying. Your Grace, Clara said, proud that her voice remained steady. I do not even know your given name. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or something softer. Nicholas, he said. My name is Nicholas. Nicholas. She tested the name on her tongue. And you must call me Clara, Clara. He said it slowly, as though tasting each syllable. It suits you. Unexpected colour in a grey world. Before she could respond to this extraordinary statement, he offered his arm. Shall we, Miss Winters? I believe we have a ballroom to scandalise. The announcement, when it came, was received with precisely the shock Clara had anticipated. Nicholas led her to the centre of the ballroom, positioned her beside him with his hand covering hers, in a gesture of unmistakable possession, and calmly informed 500 of London's most influential citizens that he had the honour of announcing his engagement to Miss Clara Winters. The silence lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then the whispers began, a rising tide of shock and speculation that washed through the Ashford Ballroom like a wave. Clara kept her chin high and her expression composed. Her mother had fainted. Elizabeth was crying. and Lady Vivienne stood like a statue carved from ice, her beautiful face utterly blank, her dark eyes fixed on the Duke with an expression that promised retribution. The wedding took place 11 days after the Ashford Ball, in a small chapel on the grounds of Ravencroft Manor. Clara wore ivory silk and spoke her vows in a clear, steady voice that betrayed nothing of the terror coursing through her veins. Nicholas's voice was equally steady, equally calm. They might have been conducting a business transaction rather than binding themselves together for eternity. By mid-afternoon, the guests had departed, and Clara found herself alone with her husband in the great entrance hall of Ravencroft Manor. Her husband. The words felt foreign, impossible. "I will show you to your rooms," Nicholas said, breaking the silence. "Mrs. Blake, the housekeeper, will attend to you." They ascended the grand staircase together, and Nicholas stopped before a door. "Your suite is connected to mine through a sitting room. You may arrange the rooms however you wish." "I'm sure they will be perfectly adequate." Nicholas turned to face her. "Clara." It was the first time he had used her given name since their engagement. "I know this is not the wedding you imagined. I want you to understand that I meant what I said about your freedom. This is your home now. You may do as you please within it." "And the other demands?" Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You mentioned an heir. That matter can wait until you are settled. There is no urgency." "I understood there was considerable urgency. Edmund Sinclair." "Edmund Sinclair's machinations do not dictate the terms of our marriage bed." Nicholas's voice was sharper than she had heard it before. "I will not come to you until you are ready. If you are never ready, then we will address the question of succession through other means. Is that clear?" Clara stared at him, trying to reconcile this consideration with his reputation for coldness. "Abundantly." "Good." He stepped back. "Mrs. Blake will be up shortly. Dinner is at 8. We can take it separately if you prefer." "I do not prefer." The words escaped before Clara could consider them. "That is, we are married, Your Grace. We might as well become accustomed to each other's company." Something flickered in Nicholas's grey eyes. "As you wish. Until dinner, then." "Duchess." The rooms were beautiful. Soft blue walls, cream-coloured furnishings, windows that looked out over gardens just beginning to show signs of spring. Someone had gone to considerable effort to make these rooms welcoming. Mrs. Blake supervised the unpacking while explaining the workings of the household. When Clara was finally alone, she sank into a chair by the fire and tried to gather her scattered thoughts. She was married to a man she barely knew. She was living in a house full of strangers. She was supposed to somehow navigate a role she had never expected to play. Duchess, wife, potential mother. Opening her writing case, she pulled out a fresh page and began to write. Whatever else changed, she would not give up her novels. Dinner was a strange affair. The dining room was enormous, and the sight of just 2 place settings at one end of the vast table struck Clara as faintly ridiculous. Nicholas stood when she entered. "You look well. Are the rooms satisfactory?" "More than satisfactory. They're beautiful. Thank you." He pulled out her chair himself. "My mother decorated them. She had excellent taste. You speak of her in the past tense." "She died when I was 12. Nicholas took his own seat. "My father never recovered from the loss. He loved her quite desperately. It was the most personal information he had volunteered." Clara found herself leaning forward. "And you? Do you remember her?" Something shifted in Nicholas's face, a softening almost imperceptible. "I remember that she smelled of roses, that she laughed easily, that she used to read to my brother James and me before bed." He paused. "I remember that she made this house feel like a home. It must have been very difficult losing her so young." Silence fell as the first course was served. Clara watched her husband covertly, trying to reconcile the cold reputation with the man who spoke so tenderly of his mother. "Tell me about your family," Nicholas said. Clara hesitated. "My father died 3 years ago. My mother lives with my sister Beatrice. Elizabeth is married to the Earl of Westfield. My brother Edward has expensive habits and little income." She sipped her wine. "What little was not entailed went to pay debts." "Your brother's debts?" "Among others." "And your dowry?" "Sufficient to prevent me from being entirely unmarriageable, but not enough to overcome my other deficiencies. Red hair, spectacles, a sharp tongue." Nicholas set down his fork. "You speak of yourself as though you were defective merchandise. I speak of myself as society sees me. Society is composed largely of fools." His grey eyes held hers. "Your hair is the colour of autumn leaves. and it is striking. Your spectacles indicate intelligence. Your sharp tongue is refreshing. Society failed to recognize your worth. That is society's failure, not yours. Clara found herself temporarily unable to speak. You are very kind. I am not kind. I am accurate. When the meal ended, Nicholas offered his arm. Would you care to see the library? The library was everything she had hoped for. 3 stories of books rose around her, and Clara felt something loosen in her chest. This is magnificent, she breathed. How many volumes? Approximately 15,000. My grandfather was the true collector. Clara moved to the nearest shelf. History, philosophy, natural science. Everything was here. You may use this room whenever you wish, Nicholas said. Consider it yours as much as mine. If there are volumes you wish to acquire, inform me. That is very generous. It is practical. He paused. May I ask you something? Of course. The project you mentioned, the private pursuit, is it something that requires particular materials? Clara felt her face heat. It requires only paper, ink, and solitude. You write. It was not a question. Clara's heart hammered. What makes you say that? I observed you before our engagement. You are always composing in your head. I can see your lips moving when you think no one is watching. Clara could deny it, but something in his gaze made her want to tell the truth. Novels, she said quietly. I write novels. Nicholas's eyebrows rose. Published? Yes, under a pseudonym, C.M. Sterling. The Gothic romances. Nicholas was silent for a moment. I confess I found them surprisingly engaging. The characterization was particularly strong. Clara stared at him. You read my books. One of them. The widow who inherits a haunted estate. His mouth curved. I believed her. She felt genuine. I'm gratified to hear it, though I must ask you to keep this information confidential. Your secret is safe. Nicholas's voice was firm. If anything, I am impressed. It takes considerable courage to create art and offer it to the world. It takes considerable financial necessity, Clara corrected. My income from writing has allowed me certain freedoms. And now that you are married to a wealthy man? Now I write because I must, because the stories demand to be told. Nicholas was quiet for a long moment. Clara, I believe we are past such formality, given that we are married and discussing your secret identity. Call me Nicholas. Despite everything, Clara felt her lips twitch. Very well, Nicholas. Better. He inclined his head. Shall I show you where the fiction is shelved? They spent the next hour exploring the library together. When they finally parted at her door, Nicholas took her hand and raised it to his lips. Thank you for your company this evening. It was unexpectedly pleasant. Unexpected for you or for me? Both, I suspect. His grey eyes held hers. Good night, Clara. Sleep well. The weeks that followed established a rhythm Clara had not anticipated. They took breakfast together each morning, discussing the day's plans. Nicholas spoke of the estate business with a passion that surprised her. He cared about Ravencroft, about the people who depended on him. They had dinner together each evening, and those meals grew longer. Conversation ranged from politics to philosophy to literature. They argued about poets. They debated government policy. They discussed her novels with frankness that both thrilled and terrified her. Your villain in the most recent one, Nicholas said one evening. He is too obviously evil from the start. He is meant to be obviously evil. That is the point. But would it not be more interesting if the reader were uncertain? If they wondered whether he might be redeemable? It was a fair criticism, and Clara found herself turning it over for days. Nicholas had a sharp eye for story, but the walls were showing cracks. She saw it in the way his eyes warmed when she made him laugh. She saw it in the gentle manner he used with his elderly grandmother, the Dowager Duchess Margaret, who visited and immediately declared Clara exactly what the boy needs. Most of all, she saw it in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. There was hunger in those grey eyes. He wanted her, and heaven help her, she wanted him too. You should tell him, the Dowager said one afternoon over tea. Whatever it is you are hiding, and do not insult me by denying you are hiding something. You should tell Nicholas the truth. I don't know what you mean. The old woman's eyes fixed on Clara. You spend hours alone each day. You emerge looking satisfied but tired. You speak of books with passion that suggests more than a reader's appreciation. You are a writer, are you not? Clara felt the blood drain from her face. How did you... I read those novels, the ones by C.M. Sterling, quite good. Oh, she smiled. When I met you, my suspicions were confirmed. You have writer's eyes. Nicholas knows, Clara said finally. He discovered it shortly after we married. Good. Secrets poison marriages. The dowager took her hand. You are good for him. I have not seen my grandson this present in a decade. He is engaging with life instead of merely enduring it. He told me he was incapable of love. He told himself that long before he told you. It was easier than facing the risk of being hurt again. The old woman's grip tightened. The question is whether you will have the courage to reach him, to refuse to accept the walls he has built. That night, Clara could not sleep. She rose and moved to the connecting sitting room door. Soft footsteps on the other side. Then silence. She opened the door. Nicholas stood in the middle of the sitting room in his dressing gown, looking startled. I apologize, he said quickly. I did not mean to disturb you. You were simply what? His jaw tightened. I could not sleep. I thought I might check that you were comfortable. By standing outside my door in the dark. Despite herself, Clara felt her lips twitch. Come in then. If you are going to lurk, you might as well do so where there is adequate seating. Nicholas stepped through the doorway into her bedchamber. The room felt different with him in it. Smaller, more charged. Your grandmother believes we should consummate the marriage, she heard herself say. Nicholas went very still. Not in those precise words, Clara continued, but she implied that secrets poison marriages. And this particular secret, the fact that we remain essentially strangers, seems relevant. Clara, I am not asking you to love me. Her voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. I understand that you cannot or will not offer that, but we spoke of practicalities when we made our arrangement. An heir, a true marriage. If we are to build any kind of life together, should we not begin as we mean to go on? Nicholas crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped inches from her. You do not know what you are asking. Then tell me. I have not been intimate with anyone in years. I had convinced myself that part of me was dead. The arrangement with Vivienne was never physical. His grey eyes burned. And now I find myself thinking of you constantly. Your voice, your laugh, the way you look at me. I lie awake wanting things I had sworn I would never want again. And I do not know what to do with that desire. Perhaps, Clara said softly, you could start by kissing me. For a long moment, Nicholas did not move. Then his hands came up to cup her face, and his mouth descended on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning. When she did not push him away, when she leaned into him instead, something shifted. The kiss deepened and grew hungry. His hands tangled in her hair. His body pressed her backward until she felt the edge of the bed. Clara! Her name was a groan. Tell me to stop. Don't stop. She pulled him closer. Nicholas, please don't stop. He lowered her to the bed, and Clara felt herself drowning in sensations she had only ever imagined. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight. I did not expect that, he said quietly. Which part? Any of it. His hand stilled on her skin. I told you I was incapable of love. I believed it, but what I feel when I am with you, it does not feel like incapacity. Clara propped herself up to look at him. What does it feel like? Like terror, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that if I jump, I will either fly or fall, and having no way to predict which. That is hardly a romantic declaration. I am not a romantic man. But his hand came up to brush hair from her face, and the gesture contradicted his words. I have built walls for a decade, and I am discovering they were never as strong as I believed. Then perhaps we can dismantle them together, brick by brick. Something shifted in his expression. Hope perhaps, or the beginning of something more. Perhaps we can. The idyll lasted 3 weeks. 3 weeks of shared breakfasts and longer dinners. 3 weeks of nights that left Clara breathless. 3 weeks during which Nicholas's walls came down brick by brick. And then Vivienne Sinclair arrived at Ravencroft Manor. Clara was in the library when she heard raised voices in the entrance hall. She set down her pen and moved to the doorway. Vivienne stood in the centre of the hall, magnificent in crimson, her beautiful face twisted with fury. Nicholas had emerged from his study, his expression cold and closed. You cannot simply refuse to see me, Vivienne was saying. After everything we have been to each other, We have been nothing to each other. Nicholas's voice was flat. We had an arrangement which I have ended. There is nothing more to discuss. Nothing more? Vivienne's laugh was brittle. You humiliated me. You cast me aside for her. She gestured at Clara. A nobody. A wallflower. You will not speak of my wife in that manner. The Duchess of Ravencroft. Vivienne's smile was sharp. Do you think she knows why you really married her? Do you think she understands that she was nothing but a strategic maneuver? She understands perfectly. I was honest with her from the beginning. Oh, were you? Did you tell her about Lucinda? Did you tell her what you did to your own brother? The silence that followed was absolute. Clara stepped forward into the hall. Ah, the little Duchess appears. Vivienne turned. How delightful. Tell me, Your Grace, has your husband shared the details of his past with you? What happens between my husband and myself is none of your concern. But it is. You see, my brother Edmund is very concerned with Nicholas's happiness, or rather his lack thereof. Vivienne moved closer. Did Nicholas tell you about Lucinda Ashford, the beautiful debutante he was engaged to once? He mentioned an engagement that ended badly. Ended badly. Vivienne's laugh was a weapon. Let me tell you the truth. Lucinda came to London with nothing but a pretty face and a talent for manipulation. She set her cap at Nicholas, seduced him utterly, made him believe she loved him desperately, and all the while she was also seducing his younger brother James. Clara's stomach turned. Lucinda played the brothers against each other, Vivienne continued, stoking jealousy until James challenged Nicholas to a duel over her honour. Nicholas refused to fight his own brother, so James went out drinking instead, got into an altercation at a gaming hell, and was killed by a stranger over a card game. Nicholas had gone white. Lucinda fled with the family jewels, while the household was distracted by James's death. The shock of losing his heir and his son's betrayal killed the old duke within the month. And Nicholas... She turned to look at him with something that might have been pity or contempt. Nicholas has blamed himself ever since, for not seeing Lucinda's true nature, for not protecting his brother, for surviving when everyone else died. That is enough. Nicholas's voice cracked like a whip. Is it? Because I think your wife deserves to know who she married. A man so damaged by one woman's betrayal that he has spent a decade punishing himself. A man who chose you, little Duchess, because he knew you would never reach his heart. Clara felt as though the ground had shifted. She looked at Nicholas, searching his face for denial. He gave her nothing. Is that true? She whispered. Is that why you chose me? Nicholas said nothing. Vivienne swept toward the door. I see I have overstayed my welcome. Do give my regards to Edmund Nicholas. He will be so pleased. The door closed behind her, and silence descended. Clara stared at Nicholas across the hall. He looked like a stranger. Nicholas, I need to speak with my solicitor. This situation with Edmund requires attention. I may be gone several days. Nicholas, please. I suggest you use the time to consider your position. Whether you wish to remain in a marriage that was, as Vivienne so accurately stated, a strategic maneuver. He turned away. Stop. The word came out sharper than Clara intended. Do not do this. Do not retreat because Vivienne Sinclair said cruel things designed to hurt us both. She told the truth. Sophie, she told the truth twisted to serve her purposes. That is not the same thing. Clara crossed the hall. I knew you chose me for strategic reasons. You were honest about that from the beginning. What I did not know was how deeply you were wounded. You do not know what you are saying. Then explain it to me. Tell me about Lucinda. Tell me about James. Tell me what happened. It does not matter. It matters to me. Clara reached for his hand. I am your wife, Nicholas. Whatever you are running from, you do not have to run alone. For a moment, just a moment, she saw something crack in his expression. Pain, longing, desperate hope. Then the walls slammed back. You should not have married me. His voice was rough. I tried to warn you. I tried to tell you. Warn me of what? That I destroy everything I touch. He pulled his hand free. Lucinda saw something in me worth having, and I failed to protect her from my brother's jealousy. James loved me, and I failed to save him from his own recklessness. My father trusted me to hold the family together, and I watched it shatter. His jaw clenched. I told you I was incapable of love. What I should have said was that I am incapable of loving without destroying. That is not true. It is true. Nicholas's voice rose. It has always been true. And these past weeks, letting myself believe that perhaps this time might be different. That was the greatest cruelty of all. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You are a fool, Nicholas Hartwell. He blinked. I beg your pardon. A fool. You have convinced yourself that love is dangerous because you were betrayed by a manipulative woman. You have spent a decade punishing yourself for failures that were never your fault. And now, when something real is finally within your grasp, you are running because running is easier than risking. You do not understand. I understand perfectly. Clara's voice was fierce now. I understand that you are terrified. I understand that letting yourself love me feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. I understand that every instinct you have is screaming at you to retreat. She stepped closer. What I do not understand, what I refuse to accept, is the idea that you are incapable of love. Because I have felt you love me, Nicholas, in the way you touch me, in the way you listen when I speak, in the way you look at me when you think I cannot see. You love me already. You are simply too afraid to admit it. Nicholas stared at her as though she had struck him. Tell me I am wrong, Clara said quietly. Look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing for me. Tell me these past weeks meant nothing. Tell me I am just a strategic maneuver. If you can say that honestly, I will never speak of this again. The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Nicholas opened his mouth, closed it, and tried again. I cannot, he said finally, and his voice broke. God help me, Clara, I cannot. Then stop running. She reached for him again, and this time he did not pull away. Stay, fight. Let me love you even if you cannot say the words back. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him, his face buried in her hair. I do not deserve you, he whispered. Let me be the judge of that. 3 days later, everything shattered. It began with a letter. Clara was in the library when the footman brought the post. Among the correspondence was a letter marked urgent. She broke the seal and read, her hands growing steadily colder. She found Nicholas in his study. When she entered, he turned, and his expression shifted when he saw her face. What has happened? Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. Edmund Sinclair had made his move. He had fabricated evidence that Nicholas had murdered his brother James. Witnesses who would swear they saw Nicholas that night. A letter supposedly in Nicholas's hand threatening James's life. Documents that placed him at the scene. The evidence was false, but it was convincing. If Edmund brought it before a magistrate, Nicholas would face trial. If convicted, he would hang. Edmund's terms were clear. Divorce Clara publicly and scandalously. Marry Vivienne within the month. Sign over controlling interest in the Ravencroft estates to a trust Edmund administers. In exchange, the evidence would be destroyed. This is... Clara could barely speak. Victor has been preparing this for years. Nicholas's voice was flat. And I have played directly into his hands. Then we will fight it. We will prove the evidence is false. How? Edmund has spent years on this. The witnesses are beyond reproach. The letter is a masterful forgery. Clara's mind raced. My publisher. Mr. Pembroke was a Bow Street runner in his younger days. He maintains connections. If there is dirt to be found on these witnesses, Pembroke can find it. You would involve yourself in this. Risk yourself. You are my husband. Your fight is my fight. Nicholas crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. I love you, he said, his voice rough. I have been trying not to say it, but I love you, Clara. I love you more than I have words to express. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. I love you too. I have loved you for weeks. Then help me fight this. Help me prove that love does not have to mean destruction. Mr. Pembroke's investigation took 3 days. What he found changed everything. The first witness had gambling debts that had been mysteriously discharged 6 months ago. The second had a sister whose scandal had been quietly suppressed. Both were compromised. Both could be pressured. Most damning, Pembroke had connections among London's forgers. One had been approached months ago to create a document in Nicholas's hand. He had declined, but he remembered the intermediary, Edmund Sinclair's personal secretary. We have him, Clara said, spreading the report across Nicholas's desk. Enough to expose the entire conspiracy. Nicholas studied the documents, his expression shifting from disbelief to hope. How did you... In 3 days. I told you. My mind works differently. Clara smiled. Never underestimate a novelist, Nicholas. We specialize in understanding how people work. He pulled her into his arms. You have saved me. In every way it is possible to save a person. We are not saved yet. We have evidence, but we still need to act. The confrontation took place at Edmund Sinclair's London townhouse 3 days later. Nicholas had sent word that he was prepared to accept terms. Edmund, confident in his victory, had agreed to a private meeting. He had not expected Nicholas to bring his wife. What is she doing here? Edmund demanded. The Duchess wished to be present, Nicholas said smoothly, as the terms affect her directly. Nicholas proceeded to draw out the conversation, asking for specifics, while Edmund's impatience grew. One final question, Nicholas said when Edmund's patience was clearly thin. The witnesses you intend to produce. Can you guarantee their testimony will hold up under examination? Something flickered in Edmund's eyes. Their testimony is solid. Will they? Even when confronted with evidence of how their cooperation was obtained, Nicholas's voice was mild. And then there is the matter of the letter itself. I have here a sworn statement from a forger who was approached to create that letter. He declined, but he remembers the intermediary quite clearly. Your personal secretary, I believe. The colour drained from Edmund's face. Did you truly believe I would simply capitulate? Nicholas rose. You had no resources, no connection. He had me. Clara stepped forward. You dismissed me as a wallflower, a nobody. But wallflowers observe things. We develop unexpected alliances. She smiled. You provided excellent material. I may use you in my next book. Edmund turned back to Nicholas, desperate now. Whatever you think you know, the magistrate will receive a full report of your conspiracy within the hour if you do not withdraw your threats immediately. Nicholas's voice was cold. Your witnesses have agreed to recant. The forger is there to testify. Your entire scheme is collapsing. He moved closer. Leave England. Take your sister with you. Remain abroad for the rest of your life, and we will not pursue prosecution. But if you ever return, if you ever threaten my family again, I will destroy you utterly. Is that understood? Edmund nodded, a single jerky movement. Then we are finished here. They walked out together into the cool evening air. Nicholas pulled Clara into his arms and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. We did it, he said. We actually did it. We did. Together. Together. He kissed the top of her head. Always together. 2 years later, Clara stood at the window of her sitting room at Ravencroft Manor, watching spring paint the gardens in shades of green and gold. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the flutter of life within. The door opened, and Nicholas entered. He set aside his papers and wrapped his arms around her from behind. There you are. I thought you might like to walk in the gardens. First, Clara said, turning in his arms, I have something to tell you. What is it? Nicholas, we're going to have a child. For a long moment he stared. Then his face transformed with joy so pure it took her breath away. A child. His hands trembled as he cupped her face. Our child. I never thought, after everything, I never dared imagine. We made them together, out of love. Nicholas pulled her close, tears dampening her hair. I spent a decade being afraid to feel, afraid that love meant destruction. And you gave me everything. You gave me life, Clara. You gave me this. They stood together in the spring sunlight, two people who had found each other across impossible distances. Do you remember what you said after you knelt before me? Clara asked. At the ball, I asked you to dance, and I said yes. And everything changed. Nicholas smiled, warm and unguarded. Are we happy? Beyond measure, she replied. Beyond anything I ever dared to dream. He kissed her, soft and full of promise. And as spring bloomed around Ravencroft Manor and new life grew within her, Clara knew with absolute certainty that the Ice Duke who had walked past his mistress to kneel before a wallflower had given her the greatest gift of all. His heart, finally and completely thawed. The woman society deemed invisible had proven them all wrong, and the man they called Ice had melted into flesh and blood and passionate devotion. Sometimes one impulsive choice changes everything. Sometimes being brave enough to see past the armor, to refuse to accept the walls, to love anyway despite the fear. That is exactly what it takes to find the life you were always meant to live.